Before Scanderbeg became a symbol, before his name echoed through fortresses and battlefields, he was a child born into a land that refused to break. Albania, in the late Middle Ages, was a place caught between worlds: Latin West, Orthodox East, and the rising power of the Ottomans pressing in like a dark tide. The mountains were both a shield and a cage, uniting clans in fierce pride, yet dividing them with rivalries that lasted generations. Into this fractured landscape, in 1405, came Gjergj Kastrioti, heir to a small but ambitious noble family in the region of Mat. His father, Gjergj Kastrioti, had no illusions about survival. Every Albanian ruler at the time balanced loyalty and betrayal like a knife edge, knowing that one wrong move could erase entire lineages. And it was in that unstable environment, a world of shifting alliances, secret promises, and wars no one wished for but everyone expected, that Scanderbeg's early character began to form. Yet what followed in his early years still sparks debate today. Some Albanian historians claim he was raised in a privileged environment, trained in the arts of war from the moment he could walk. Others insist his childhood was overshadowed by political deals forced on his family as the Ottoman Empire grew stronger. What is known is that the Ottomans watched Albanian nobles closely, always ready to exploit weakness. Gjergj Kastrioti, facing a vastly superior power, agreed to send his sons as hostages, a common Ottoman strategy, but one that carried heavy psychological scars for those who lived through it. Before we continue, thank you for watching this far. It honestly means a lot. I wanted to take just a few seconds to tell you that we now have our own membership community here on the channel. If you enjoy these deep dives into Balkan and Albanian history, if you feel proud seeing our stories told properly, and if you want to support the channel directly, you can join our members by clicking the button below. Members get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes posts, exclusive polls where you help choose future topics. And for the higher tiers, your name even appears at the end of every documentary. It's completely optional, but it helps me invest more time, more research, and bring you even better content. Let's get back to our story. And so, young Gjergj, still barely into adolescence, was taken east. Some say his departure was honourable. Others say it was coerced. But in every version, the same truth remains. His life was ripped from its roots long before he ever had a chance to choose his path. Inside the Ottoman system, everything changed. The boy from the Albanian mountains stepped into an imperial machine designed to remake him, reshape him, and claim him. The Ottomans didn't simply demand loyalty, they engineered it. Gjergj was placed in the Devshirme-like educational structure used for elite captives, trained to speak new languages, to understand Islamic culture, to obey a chain of command that tolerated no hesitation. And he excelled. This is perhaps the most controversial part of his early life. He wasn't just a reluctant hostage. He became one of the most promising young warriors in the empire's service. Ottoman chronicles describe him as disciplined, gifted, and fiercely talented with the sword. Albanian chroniclers, on the other hand, often soften this phase, portraying him as silently resisting, waiting, preparing. But the truth is more complicated. He grew into a brilliant military mind inside the very empire he would one day fight. What no one could erase, however, was the memory of where he came from. Even as he climbed Ottoman ranks, even as he earned the name Scanderbeg, a title meant to reshape him in the image of Alexander the Great. Something in him refused to fully bend. Some say it was loyalty to his bloodline. Others say it was the mountains themselves, the awareness that he came from a land that was never conquered in spirit, only in circumstance. The Ottomans believed they had molded him into one of their own. But this belief would eventually become one of the greatest miscalculations in Balkan history. As Scanderbeg entered adulthood, his rise through the Ottoman ranks became impossible to ignore. By his early 20s, he had already fought in campaigns across Asia Minor and the Balkans, earning a reputation for precision, discipline, and a battlefield instinct that seemed almost unnatural. Ottoman commanders trusted him more than they trusted many of their own. And this is where the story takes its sharpest controversial turn. Scanderbeg wasn't just a participant in Ottoman wars, he was one of their assets. This reality is often uncomfortable for those who want the legend without the complications, but it is part of what makes his transformation so extraordinary. There are whispers in some chronicles that he even took part in actions against Balkan forces, Serbs, Hungarians, even Albanians serving other lords. These claims are debated heavily, but what is undeniable is that he was entrusted with authority, men, and command. The Ottomans didn't give that to anyone unless they believed they owned his loyalty. They believed they had reshaped Gjergj Kastrioti into Scanderbeg. They believed wrong. What changed him, or perhaps what reminded him of who he truly was, remains mysterious. Some credit letters secretly exchanged with his family. Others say he felt the pull of Albania the moment he returned on campaigns near its borders. And there are theories, far more controversial, that he saw firsthand how dangerously overconfident the empire was becoming, that he realized a single revolt well-timed could turn an empire's expectations against itself. Whatever the truth, by the time the Ottomans sent him to participate in the campaign against the Hungarians in 1443, Scanderbeg was no longer the obedient commander they imagined. He was watching, waiting, counting every weakness. Then came the Battle of Niš, the moment history split. Under the command of the Ottoman general Ali Pasha, the army faced unexpected chaos as Hungarian forces under John Hunyadi shattered their lines. And here, in the confusion, Scanderbeg made the decision that would define the next quarter century. He didn't retreat. He didn't regroup. He took his entire unit, turned them away from the battlefield, and began the most calculated act of rebellion in Albanian history. He used forged documents, another controversial detail rarely emphasized, allegedly written in the Sultan's name, ordering the fortress of Kruja to be handed over to him. Whether he forged them himself or had help remains an open debate. What matters is that the Ottomans believed them. His own homeland welcomed him not as a traitor, but as a returning heir. And in the moment he raised the Kastrioti emblem once again over his ancestral fortress, Scanderbeg severed the chain the Ottoman Empire thought was unbreakable. The rebellion didn't begin with a speech or a declaration. It began with one man who knew the empire from the inside and turned that knowledge into a weapon. A man who had mastered the Ottoman system so completely that he could now dismantle it piece by piece. Albania had not seen unity in decades, but Scanderbeg understood something no one before him had been able to grasp. Albanians would not unite for a crown. They would unite for a cause. And he was about to give them one. When Scanderbeg reclaimed Kruja, he didn't just take back a fortress. He forced the entire political landscape of Albania to shift. Suddenly, every noble family in the region had to confront a question they had avoided for generations. Would they keep fighting each other, or unite under a man who had just humiliated the Ottoman Empire from the inside? Albania at the time was a patchwork of rival clans. The Dukagjini, the Arianiti, the Thopia, the Balsha remnants, the Zaharia feud. Alliances rose and collapsed like summer storms. These families were proud, territorial, and deeply suspicious of one another. The Ottomans had taken advantage of this for decades. Everyone knew it, but no one had been able to overcome it. Not until the winter of 1444. Scanderbeg requested, and some say demanded, a gathering in the town of Lezhë, then under Venetian control. The setting itself was symbolic, neutral ground, a place where no clan could claim dominance. And what happened inside that hall is still debated with passion today. Some describe it as a noble council with equal voices. Others insist Scanderbeg walked in already knowing the outcome and simply let the formalities play out. Whatever the case, the League of Lezhë emerged from that meeting, a military alliance that effectively made Scanderbeg the commander of a united Albanian front. Not a king, not a dictator, but something more dangerous for an empire, a leader chosen because he was necessary. And this unity wasn't built on romantic brotherhood. It was built on hard political calculus. The nobles recognized that Scanderbeg brought two things no one else could offer. He understood Ottoman strategy better than the Ottomans, and he had proven, in a single stroke, that the empire was not invincible. Still, not everyone joined willingly. Some families agreed because they feared losing influence. Others didn't want Scanderbeg's growing prestige to eclipse their own. A few, like the Dukagjini, joined but continued playing their own political games behind the scenes. The League was powerful, but fragile, and Scanderbeg knew it. Almost immediately, the Ottomans demanded Kruja back. Their message implied a mistake, a misunderstanding. Surely this Scanderbeg had not truly betrayed them. The empire had not yet realized that it had created a strategist who could now predict their response before they even delivered it. When the full weight of the Ottoman army finally marched toward Albania to crush the revolt before it spread across the Balkans, Scanderbeg faced a terrifying reality. His alliance existed on paper, but its unity had never been tested in blood. And this is where his leadership became legendary. Instead of hiding behind fortifications or retreating into the mountains, Scanderbeg marched directly toward the invading force. His goal wasn't just to win, it was to transform the League from a political agreement into a shared identity, one shaped by danger, loyalty, and the kind of victory that no clan could claim solely for itself. What followed would set the tone for the next 25 years, a series of battles in which Scanderbeg used Albania's terrain, timing, and guerrilla tactics so effectively that the Ottomans began to fear a region they once considered irrelevant. Hill ambushes, feigned retreats, nighttime strikes, strategies he had learned inside the empire were now turned against it with ruthless precision. And as Albania's warriors returned home from these victories, something remarkable happened. The League was no longer a fragile alliance. It had become a cause worth fighting for. The Ottoman Empire had expected a rebellion. It had not expected a united Albania. After the League of Lezhë became a military reality, Scanderbeg faced the challenge that would define his legacy, proving that a small mountain nation could stand against the largest, richest, and most relentless empire of its age. And this wasn't just a military struggle, it was psychological. The Ottomans weren't used to resistance lasting more than a few years. They expected rebellions to burn bright and then collapse. Albania refused. The first major test came when the Ottomans sent an army so large that Venetian merchants supposedly began leaving their shops in fear, convinced Scanderbeg would be swept aside. But the Ottomans had two fatal weaknesses in Albanian territory. They underestimated the terrain, and they underestimated the man who understood every method they used to conquer the Balkans. Scanderbeg didn't meet them on open ground. He cut their supply lines, ambushed their scouts, manipulated their routes, and forced them to march into terrain where cavalry strength meant nothing. His troops fought like shadows, strike, vanish, strike again. By the time the Ottomans realized what was happening, entire battalions were being pulled into mountain passes that became death traps. When the main force finally encountered Scanderbeg's army, they were weakened, frustrated, and demoralized. He, meanwhile, had been waiting for the perfect moment. What followed were victories so shocking that European courts began doubting the reports. How could a rebel leader, with a fractured alliance and a mountainous backwater, beat elite Ottoman commanders again and again? Soon, Scanderbeg became a legend across the continent. Popes called him the shield of Christianity. Italian nobles offered him alliances. Even powers that normally ignored the Balkans suddenly saw Albania as a frontline fortress holding back an empire. But inside Albania, things were never simple. While Scanderbeg fought battle after battle, the nobles of the League continued their rivalries. Some withheld troops when it suited them. Others negotiated secretly with Venice, or even the Ottomans. Scanderbeg was fighting two wars at once, one against the empire and one against the political instability of his own homeland. And the Ottomans adapted. After each defeat, they returned with larger and more disciplined forces. They replaced incompetent commanders. They studied Scanderbeg's tactics. They built new roads, new fortresses, and new supply systems specifically designed to crack Albania's defenses. Their message was clear. Albania was no longer a rebellion. It was now a personal insult to the Sultan. Still, Scanderbeg held out. Against armies 10 times his size, he kept winning. And these weren't symbolic victories. They were strategic disasters for the Ottomans. Every campaign cost them money, soldiers, prestige, and each failure encouraged other Balkan regions to resist. For the first time, the empire seemed mortal. Yet behind the triumphs was a darker reality. Albania was bleeding. Villages burned, resources drained, and population losses mounted. Scanderbeg's brilliance kept the nation alive, but the cost of survival was enormous. Europe praised him, yet rarely sent the reinforcements he needed. Many promised, few delivered. And this tension, heroic victories overshadowed by growing exhaustion, set the stage for the next, more complicated chapter in Scanderbeg's life. His uneasy, tactical alliance with the Byzantines, his campaigns in Italy, and the final turning point in a war that had lasted a generation. As the war dragged on, Scanderbeg realized something that few Balkan leaders had ever understood. Survival required shifting alliances, not blind loyalty. Albania was too small, too isolated, and too battered to face the Ottomans alone forever. And so began one of the most controversial phases of his life, the diplomatic balancing act between Venice, Naples, and the collapsing Byzantines. The Byzantine Empire, clinging desperately to its final fragments, saw Scanderbeg as a miracle they had not asked for, but desperately needed. Their diplomats urged him to join a final Balkan coalition, hinting that Albania, as an Illyrian successor state, had historic ties to Constantinople's legacy. But Scanderbeg knew the truth. The Byzantines were weeks away from extinction. Their armies were underpaid, their nobles were divided, and their capital was surrounded. Aligning with them was a moral gesture, not a practical one. Yet even with their doom approaching, the Byzantines offered something Scanderbeg couldn't ignore: legitimacy. A symbolic alliance with the last remnants of Rome allowed him to present his war not as a tribal uprising, but as the final stand of an ancient Balkan European world. Meanwhile, across the Adriatic, Naples had its own reason to court him. Italian leaders feared that if Albania fell, the Ottomans would leap across the sea and threaten Italy next. Scanderbeg understood this fear and used it strategically. His decision to travel to Italy and personally command armies there remains one of the most debated moves in Albanian history. Some say it was brilliant. He secured money, supplies, and military prestige that kept Albania alive. Others argue he abandoned his homeland at a critical moment, leaving it vulnerable to Ottoman attacks. Both sides have a point. What's certain is that Italy witnessed something extraordinary. When Scanderbeg led Albanian troops across the fields of Apulia, the Italian commanders, many of whom had doubted his reputation, were stunned. His cavalry maneuvers were precise, almost surgical. His discipline rivaled the best mercenaries of Europe, and his victories earned him rewards, estates, and international fame. But while Italy celebrated him, Albania bled in his absence. The Ottomans launched new offensives, destroying farms and weakening morale. The League of Lezhë, already fragile, fractured further. Nobles who had always resented Scanderbeg now claimed he was prioritizing foreign glory over the homeland. Venice, always cautious and distrustful, positioned itself carefully, waiting to see which side would win. When Scanderbeg finally returned, he faced a homeland both grateful for his success and exhausted by his absence. But there was no time to rebuild unity. The Ottomans were preparing their largest and most organized campaign yet. A campaign designed not to defeat Albania, but to erase it. Scanderbeg knew what was coming. Europe knew what was coming. The Ottomans themselves spoke of this invasion as the one that would finally end the Albanian problem. And all of this pressure, political, military, personal, would culminate in the final act of his life, where the legend would rise higher than ever, but the cost would finally catch up to him. By the 1460s, the Ottoman Empire had reached a point of obsession. Scanderbeg was no longer seen as a rebel or an inconvenience. He was seen as a symbol, a dangerous one. A man whose victories inspired uprisings from Bosnia to Greece, whose reputation undermined Ottoman prestige, and whose resilience embarrassed sultans who ruled half the known world. And so, the empire prepared a campaign unlike anything Albania had seen before. This time, they didn't rely on a single army or a single commander. They sent wave after wave, stretching Scanderbeg's forces thin and draining Albania's resources. They built advanced siege equipment, expanded garrisons across the Balkans, and created a supply network designed specifically to overwhelm Kruja, the fortress they had failed to take for decades. Kruja wasn't just a military target, it was a symbol of Albanian survival. As long as the eagle banner flew above its walls, Scanderbeg's legend remained alive. And so the Ottomans encircled it, determined to suffocate the city into submission. But even now, in the twilight of his life, Scanderbeg refused to do what was expected. Instead of locking himself inside the fortress to endure a siege, he adopted his signature unpredictability. He struck Ottoman camps at night, cut off their foraging parties, and used the mountains as a weapon the empire still couldn't fully understand. But even with his brilliance, time was catching up to him. Albania was starving. Its population had dwindled. The League of Lezhë had lost many of its original nobles. And Scanderbeg himself, once a warrior feared for his strength and endurance, was worn thin by decades of war, diplomacy, and betrayal. Still, he held the line. Even as the Ottomans tightened their grip, he forced them into stalemates that cost them thousands of soldiers. At one point, despite overwhelming odds, he broke the siege temporarily and secured desperately needed aid from Naples. It was one of his last great miracles, but it was a victory that couldn't change the inevitable. In early 1468, as Albania braced for another Ottoman campaign, the man who had survived every ambush, every siege, every political trap, and every impossible battle, finally met an enemy he couldn't defeat. A sudden illness, believed by some to have been malaria, by others exhaustion or infection, forced him into bed. Even then, he continued giving orders, drafting plans, and trying to secure alliances that would carry Albania after him. But the moment his death spread through the land, everything changed. Chroniclers describe a silence falling over Albania, followed by a panic that no army or fortress could stop. For over 2 decades, Scanderbeg had been the one constant, the strategist, the diplomat, the unifier, the wall between an empire and a people. And now that wall was gone. The Ottomans, upon hearing the news, reportedly celebrated. They believed history had finally cleared their path. And within years, Albania, fractured, surrounded, exhausted, fell under Ottoman control. The dream of a united, independent Albanian state would not return until centuries later. Yet something remarkable happened after Scanderbeg's death. His legacy didn't fade. It grew. Italian rulers preserved his memory in chronicles. European poets praised him in their writings. Even Ottoman authors admitted, with grudging respect, that he was the most troublesome enemy they had ever faced in the Balkans. And among Albanians, his story became more than history. It became identity. A man who rose from hostage to general, who overturned an empire's expectations, who united a divided land, who held off the greatest superpower of his age for a quarter of a century, and who, long after death, continued shaping the destiny of a nation. Scanderbeg didn't live to see Albania free, but without him, Albania might not have survived at all.